Okay, so example 4, we have 40x to the 4th y squared minus 24x squared y. We are looking here for the GCF. That's our first thing always. Every time we factor, we always look for a GCF first. Okay, so we need to find first the GCF of 40x to the 4th y squared. So the first thing we have to do is we need to find the prime factorization of 40. So we're going to use a factor tree here. What are two factors of 40?
8 times 5.
8 times 5. Now, is 5 a prime number? Yeah, 5 is a prime number. Is 8 a prime number? No. 8 can break down even more. What does that break down to? Good. 4 and 2. 2 is a prime number, but it's 4. No. 4 breaks down to 2 times 2. So let's rewrite this as a product of primes. 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. That gives me the 40. We have x to the 4th, so that's x times x times x times x. And then we also have times a y squared, so times y times y. So this is all 40x to the 4th y squared broken down. We just broke it down to as many factors as we could. Okay? If you were to do all the multiplication out, we would still end up with this answer. What about 24x squared y? Is this 24 positive or negative? It's negative. So we actually have to factor negative 24. How does negative 24 factor? Whenever we have a negative, the first two factors I always want you to write are negative 1 times what? Negative 1 times positive 24 will give me negative 24. Negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, so you're always going to use negative 1 as your first factor. Now let's break down 24. What are two factors of 24? 6 and 4. Are either of these a prime number? No. 6 breaks down to what? 3 and 2. And 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So here's my primes. So we have negative 24x squared y. Okay, so how does negative 24 break up? Negative 1 times
3.
Will we put them in order from smallest to biggest? Times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times x times x times y. Good. So all we did was we broke up both of those as much as we could. Now what do we do? Now we need to find the GCF. So we have to circle what they have in common. So what do they have in common? I see some 2's here. I see some more 2's and some more 2's. So there's 3 2's in common.
X and Y.
There's how many x's? 2 x's in common. And how many y's? Just 1. So what's my GCF? My GCF is 2 times 2 times 2. There were 3 2's in common. How many x's?
2
times x times x times y. Just one y in common. Okay, so what does that simplify to? 8x squared y. So we multiply 2 times 2 gives me 4, times 2 gives me 8. X times x is x squared times y. So my GCF here is 8x squared y. So that was the greatest common factor. So I factor that out. So I pull it out. What's left over? Of 40x to the 4th y squared, what was left over? 5. X times x, which gives me x squared times y. So 5x squared y. Of this other guy, negative 24x squared y, what's left over? Negative 1 times 3, which gives me what? Negative 3. And are there any variables left over? So we're done.
Wait, that's not a negative 3.
Yes, it is.
It's negative 1. How'd you get 5?
Okay, so we have 14x to the third, y to the third, minus 21x squared y, plus 35xy. We want to factor this using the GCF. So the first thing we have to do is find the GCF. I have 3 terms again, so I'm going to be finding the GCF of 3 different terms. First term I need to factor out, 14x to the third, y to the third. How does that factor out? Well, let's factor 14 first. How does 14 factor? 7 times 2. Are both of those primes? So we have 2 times 7 times what? Times x times x times x times y times y times y. Good. Okay. This 21x squared y, is it a positive or a negative?
Negative.
It is a negative. So how does negative 21 factor out? What did I tell you?
Negative 1.
Good. Negative 1 and 21 is what we start with. We always pull out the negative 1 first. How does 21 break down? 3 times 7. Are both of those primes? Yep. So this would be negative 1 times 3 times 7 times x times y. Good. We also have to break down 35xy. How does 35 break down? 7 times 5. Are those primes? Yep. So 5 times 7 times x times y. Excellent. Now we have to look at what all 3 have in common. So what do all 3 of these guys have in common?
7.
They have a 7 in common. This is hard to circle. They have 1x in common and 1y in common. So what's my GCF here? 7x
times, or 7xy.
7xy. Good. So my GCF is just 7xy. That's the only thing, thank you, that they all have in common. So I'm going to factor out 7xy. And then I just take everything that's left over. From 14x to the third, y to the third, what's left over? 2 x squared times y squared. Good job. Okay, what about negative 21x squared y? What's left there? Negative 3 times x. And 35xy?
5y.
Just a 5. So it's going to be plus 5. And I'm done. That's it. Okay, and that's